Good morning, and thank you for watching today's History News channel. I am Athena Tran, and I will be speaking on the American Revolution and helping you all learn about this important history. First off, if you don't know what the American Revolution is, let me explain to you what it is. From our reliable resource, History.com, the Revolutionary War was an insurrection by American patriots in the 13 colonies to British rule, resulting in American independence. The Revolutionary War, or also known as the American Revolution, lasted from 1775 to 1783. I will be speaking on 3 causes of the Revolutionary War, which are the French and Indian War, the Stamp Act, and the Sugar Act. First, I will be talking about the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War, or also known as the 7 Years' War, was a conflict between Britain and France. France had an expansion into the Ohio River Valley, which is what caused multiple conflicts with the British colonies. There were many battles which led to the British declaration of war in 1756. British had then gained Canada territories from France at the 1763 Peace Conference. The French and Indian War is what brought more territories, which became expensive because it led to new and disliked taxes from the British government. The 7 Years' War was what ended the conflict between France and Britain for the control of North America. It left Britain with control of Canada. Even though Britain won the war, it left the British Empire in a huge amount of debt. The war had benefited the American colonists, which is what brought the British to the idea of making them part of paying the debt from the war. Now I will be speaking on the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was one of the taxes that the British government created. The Stamp Act happened in 1765 and was the first internal tax that was directed on American colonists. The Stamp Act is all on paper documents in their colonies. It was during the time when the British Empire was in huge debt from the French and Indian War. It caused problems because the colonists believed that it was unconstitutional and caused them to use violence against stamp collectors to get them to quit. Then the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act on March 22nd, 1765. It was passed to help the British replenish their finances from the debts of the 7 Years' War with France. The Stamp Act then got repealed, but then came the Declaratory Act, which gave power to pass any law over the colonists that it saw fit. Now, let's speak on my final topic, the Sugar Act. You know how I just spoke about the Stamp Act? Well, that wasn't the only tax. There was also the Sugar Act. It was passed through the Parliament in April of 1764. The act was to put tax on sugar, and I mean anything that had sugar in it. It had affected Boston and New England because colonists there used sugar to make their rum. You probably have thought of this in your head, and to confirm your thought, yes, this was another act by Britain to help pay their huge debts from the 7 Years' War. There are more topics that are needed to go over, such as the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, Declaration of Independence, Paul Revere, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and maybe some extra facts, which will all be talked about from my co-workers. Now, my fellow co-worker, Stephanie, will be speaking on the next few causes of the American Revolution.
Good morning, I am Stephanie Cazares, and I'll be speaking on more important information that helped cause the American Revolution. The first thing that I'm going to be talking about today is how Great Britain imposed another act upon the colonies. This act was known as the Townshend Act. It wasn't just one specific act, but instead it was a series of acts combined. The Townshend Act was effective throughout the years of 1767 and 1768. The colonists were obviously not happy with the act, just like how they weren't with the Stamp Act nor the sugar tax that Athena had mentioned previously. The taxes raised revenue in the colonies, which were used to pay the salaries of governors and judges so that they would remain loyal to Great Britain. The Townshend Act also enforced trade regulations, and the Townshend Act was also partly made to punish New Yorkers for violating the Quartering Act. The Quartering Act was when the colonies were required to provide housing and supplies for British soldiers that were stationed in America. The British Parliament believed that they had the right to tax the colonies because they thought that they were still part of Britain even though they were across the ocean. The taxes were placed on glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea. And these were the items that were most commonly used among the colonists. So they weren't really happy about that. They put many different taxes on the colonists in order to try and gain all of the money they needed to pay after they had lost the 7 Years' War against France. Shortly after the Townshend Act was placed on the colonists, the Boston Massacre took place. It happened on March 5th of 1770, and it all started because of a one-sided snowball fight. Were throwing snowballs to the British soldiers, but they were also insulting them. So the colonists ended up cornering the British soldiers, making them feel threatened by them. Because the British soldiers did feel threatened, they shot straight towards the crowd and ended up killing 5 people. One of them being America's very first black patriot. His name was Crispus Attucks. The massacre caused a court trial which John Adams actually defended the soldiers, saying that they were defending themselves against the colonists, which in a way was true. Out of the 8 soldiers, only 2 of them ended up being punished for the deaths of the 5 colonists. After the Boston Massacre took place, the Boston Tea Party happened. On May 10th, 1773, the British Parliament placed another tax called the Tea Act. This act gave the British East India Company control over the American tea trade. Since tea was very popular at the time and would usually be smuggled in, the colonists didn't really have to pay any taxes on them because they were smuggled in. But now that the British company had control over the tea trade, the colonists had to pay a tax. So they weren't happy about that because they didn't have to pay one before. This made merchants that worked with the illegal smuggling of the tea lose their business and their money. An organization called the Sons of Liberty, which was originally formed to oppose the Stamp Act, thought the Tea Act was the final straw of the series of acts placed by Britain. So the colonists dressed up and disguised themselves as Native Americans. They got onto Britain's docked ships and destroyed many crates of tea, 342 crates to be exact. The tea belonged to the British East India Company, and the disguised colonists dumped the tea into the Boston Harbor and ended up dropping about 42 tons of tea into the sea. The incident took place on December 16 of 1773, which was just a couple months after the Tea Act was imposed. The Boston Tea Party was a protest and a demonstration of the American colonists' resentment against the British government. This will now be extended by my coworker, Arissa.
Good morning. I am Arissa Ramirez, and I will be speaking on mainly a few people that were involved throughout the American Revolution. First, I will be talking about the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was caused by the Boston Tea Party. The Declaration of Independence is known to be a statement that was written by Thomas Jefferson. The statement was also known for what it said, of course. The statement was declaring the 13 American colonies their freedom from Great Britain. These were natural legal rights. The Declaration of Independence was adopted July 4th, 1776. It was also known for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The next thing I will be talking about is Paul Revere. Paul Revere was born in Boston, Mass. He was born January 1st, 1735. He was a very educated kid. He was educated in reading and writing. When he was 19, he inherited his father's business when he died. He decided in the end that it was best to leave the business and go join the army in 1756. He joined the army around the time the Indian War was going on. After the war, Revere had returned home after he failed and saw he couldn't be in the army. He had other plans of his own. He started to build his family business back up again. He was married to a woman named Sarah Orney in 1765. They had children before she sadly passed away. Later on, the Boston Massacre had begun. Revere became master of using his skills. The Boston Massacre ended with a standoff with both parties coming together and standing off, of course. Revere spied on British soldiers. On April 18th, 1777, Revere was warned about the British arrivals. Around the same time, around 10 p.m., he went out in the dark from his home in Boston with two other writers. Revere's next stop was to warn the others that were helping him out. They lived in Concord, Massachusetts, and by the time he went to tell them, he had been captured by the British. He was soon released. Paul Revere died on May 10th, 1818. The last person I will be talking about is no other than George Washington. George Washington was born February 22nd, 1732. He was born in Westmoreland County, Virginia. He was one out of the 6 children of Augustine and Mary Ball Washington. He was also the firstborn out of 6 children. When he was 17, he got his first job in 1752 as a surveyor in Shenandoah Valley. He joined the British Army when the French and Indian War was going on. When the war finally ended, Washington went back home in Virginia. He went home because of the death of his brother. When Washington returned home, he was married to a wealthy widow in 1759. Her name was Martha Danbridge Custis. In Martha's previous marriage, she had 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. When Washington got married to Martha Washington, Washington decided to adopt both children. In 1775, the Congress chose Washington to command the army. In 1989, part of his leadership, the Congress chose Washington as their new president. Washington was the first president of the United States, 1789 through 1997. He was general of the Continental Army. He was a large plantation owner. He didn't believe in the party system. George Washington died December 14, 1990. Finally, the last person who will close us off is Romina.
Good morning, I'm Romina Rosas-Contreras, and I'm here to report to you guys about Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is the 2nd vice president and became the 3rd president and first secretary of the state. And he also believes in state rights that is greater over federal rights. And he lived in Montecelio and owned hundreds of slaves. So he freaking slaved them all and everything they knew to slaves. Just imagine that. And here are some extra facts: is that the Townshend Acts came into existence in 1767 and was created by Charles Townshend. The act was passed by the English Parliament. It was put into place to correct taxes and American colonies by adding import customs to items such as paint, glass, lead, and tea. So imagine that. And that is it for today. Thank you for everything.